Ever feel like you're really on a roll with something important, maybe a big project or, a goal you're working
Oh
towards,
yeah,
and
definitely.
then just, ooh, wham, life throws a curveball, like a surprise problem or something totally unexpected just messes up your flow.
Totally. That feeling, where outside stuff disrupts your focus. We all get that.
No.
And it's fascinating because even in something like high stakes poker tournaments, keeping your head clear under pressure is, well, it's crucial.
Exactly. And that's really what we're diving into today. We're looking at strategic thinking through the lens of poker tournaments.
Right.
We're using an article called Poker Strategy Review, Tournament Decision Making and ICM Pressure. It's almost like we're getting a peek into a live coaching session.
And what's great about this source, I think, is that it's not just theory, right?
Yeah.
It actually breaks down real hands, real decisions made when the pressure's really on.
Yeah.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to kind of pull out those key insights about thinking strategically, assessing risk, adapting when things change fast. These are skills, we see them in poker here,
Yeah.
but they're super relevant anywhere you make complex decisions.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack, how to weigh risk when things get intense, how to read your opponent, whether that's in business or negotiation, how to manage your resources, your chips in poker, and this thing called ICM pressure, which sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is.
The article even kicks off talking about those everyday things like package deliveries messing things up, just shows how small stuff can affect you when you need to be sharp.
That's a perfect starting point, actually, because it connects this like high-level strategy stuff right back to things we all deal with. These principles aren't just for poker players. They're about managing your mental game, really, in any tough spot.
Okay, so let's jump into the first big hand example. Imagine this. You're in the small blind position, holding ace-jack offsuit.
Okay, decent hand.
Decent hand, yeah. An ace and a jack, different suits. But then, two players before you, they push all their chips in. All in. What do you do?
Okay, so the coaching advice here, it's fold.
Fold. Fold. Really? My first thought is ace-jack. That's pretty strong. I want to play that.
I know, that's the gut reaction for most people. But the reasoning here, it really teaches you about strategic patience.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, yeah, ace-jack is strong in a vacuum. But the context, the situation, completely changes its value here.
Ah, the context.
Right. In this scenario, you're actually doing well overall. You're second in chips. When two people are already all in, the risk of you calling and maybe getting knocked out, it just outweighs the potential gain.
So the takeaway isn't just about poker. It's knowing when maybe you hold something good, but you got to sacrifice it to protect your overall position, like in a longer game or project.
Exactly that. Seeing the bigger picture. It hammers home that core idea. Preserve what you have when you're already in a strong spot. Your risk tolerance should change based on where you stand overall.
Right. Preserving resources when you're ahead. Makes sense.
The probability shift.
Okay, let's move to the next one. Pocket sevens. So picture this. A player, sort of middle of the pack, chip-wise. They've suddenly shove all in. You look down, you've got a pair of sevens. Now what?
Okay, different situation. Here, the advice is actually to call.
Call. Okay, why the change?
Well, this decision highlights a different part of strategy. Taking calculated risks to grow.
Calculated risks. All right.
Yeah. Pocket sevens, okay, they're not amazing, but statistically, they're probably a slight favorite against the kind of hands a mid-stack player might shove with there.
Okay.
And crucially, at this stage of the tournament, you're not like right near the money bubble yet.
Yeah.
You still need to build your stack to make a real run. Survival isn't the only goal right now.
Ah, okay. So this is more like, say, deciding to make a slightly riskier investment because the potential payoff helps you reach a bigger goal. You can't just play defense all the time.
Exactly. It's finding that balance, isn't it, between protecting and growing. This leans towards growth because the risk is, well, reasonable, and the reward, more chips, really helps your chances later.
Now, this next one, pocket fives, sounds like it gets tricky. You're short on chips, someone goes all in, and they actually show you their hand later, ace-3 offsuit. But you have pocket fives. What's the play?
So the initial advice here is actually fold again.
Fold pocket fives against ace-3. Why? Fives beat ace-high if nothing improves.
But remember the context. You're short-stacked, and crucially, the article mentions something called ICM pressure.
Right, ICM pressure. Break that down simply for us.
Okay, Think of ICM like this.
Yeah.
The closer you get to the prize money payouts in a tournament, the more valuable each chip you hold becomes in real dollar terms, not just chip terms.
Okay, like nearing a bonus target at work or something.
Kinda, yeah. Suddenly, just surviving, just making it into the money becomes way more important than taking a big gamble. So even if Pocket Fives has a mathematical edge against Ace 3,
Which it does.
right, which it does, but when you're short-stacked and close to the payout bubble, avoiding any risk that could bust you becomes the top priority. That's ICM pressure affecting your decision. It's the money implications.
Got it. Protect the small stack to limp into the money, but then the opponent shows Ace 3 offsuit. You mentioned that's maybe not a standard shove there.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting, moving beyond just the theory. The fact that the opponent made a move that's, let's say, statistically a bit loose or questionable,
Yeah.
that gives you incredibly valuable information about how they play. It tells you something about them.
So it's not just about the math, it's about reading the player, the human element.
Precisely. You observe that and you realize, okay, this player might be more aggressive or maybe willing to gamble with weaker hands than someone playing strictly by the book.
Yeah.
This is the metagame people talk about, layering your understanding of specific opponents onto the basic strategy.
Okay, so how does that knowledge actually help you later against that player?
Well, a couple of ways. If you see that same player make another big aggressive bet later,
Yeah.
you might be a bit more willing to call them down, maybe with a hand that you'd normally fold, because you've seen evidence they might be bluffing or overplaying a weak hand.
Okay, widen your calling range against them.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
But conversely, you might be less likely to try and bluff them. If they're calling shoves with Ace 3, they might call your bluff too, right?
Good point.
Yeah.
So it cuts both ways. That's fascinating. It really is like figuring out someone's tendencies in a negotiation, isn't it? Are they a risk taker? Are they conservative?
Exactly that. You move beyond the general rules and start tailoring your strategy to the specific people and behaviors you're seeing.
Now, the article also touches on these poker tools. HUD's heads-up displays and software like Hand2Note, Poker Tracker. What are these, basically?
Think of them as data collection tools for poker players. They track every hand played against opponents online and compile stats on them.
Stats like what?
Like how often they raise before the flop, how often they fold to bets, how aggressive they are, tons of data points. This info then gets displayed right on the screen during play, like an overlay.
Whoa, so it's like having a dynamic scouting report on everyone at the table.
Pretty much, yeah. It can give players who use them well a significant edge, providing statistical insights into opponents' styles.
But I guess there's a catch.
Well, yeah, the article points out they can be pricey, often subscription-based, and they're not simple. There's a learning curve to actually using the data effectively.
So the advice is basically weigh the cost and complexity against how seriously you play.
Exactly. If you're just playing casually, the cost and effort might not make sense. But for serious grinders, they're often considered essential tools. The article suggests looking for maybe cheaper or one-time purchase options if you're not playing huge volumes.
Makes sense. Okay, let's quickly clarify a few other terms the article uses. First, bubble pressure.
Right. Bubble pressure is just that intense feeling and the strategic shifts that happen when you're getting really close to the money payouts in a tournament.
People get nervous.
Yeah. Short stacks get super tight, trying desperately not to bust out just before getting paid. Big stacks, meanwhile, might try to bully them, knowing they're afraid to risk chips.
Okay. And ICM-aware decision-making. We touched on ICM.
Yeah, so being ICM aware means you're making choices thinking about the real money value of your chips, not just the chip count. How much is finishing 10th worth versus 9th? That calculation affects whether you take a risk or play it safe near the payouts.
Got it. Then the difference between chip preservation and chip accumulation seems straightforward.
It is, mostly. Preservation is focusing on not losing chips key when you're ahead or near the bubble. Accumulation is actively trying to win more chips, usually earlier on, or when you need to build a stack to compete for the top spots. Knowing when to switch modes is key.
And last one, opponent stack awareness.
Simply means paying close attention to how many chips your opponents have. A tiny stack might shove with anything out of desperation. A huge stack might call bets more loosely because they can afford it. Their stack size gives clues about their likely actions and hand ranges.
Okay, cool. The article kind of summarizes these lessons neatly. That ace-jack hand against the two all-ins teaches stack preservation when ahead.
Right. Don't get greedy.
Pocket 7 says take calculated risks when you need to grow.
Yeah, know when to step on the gas a bit.
Pocket fives shows how ICM, that bubble pressure, can make you fold a hand you might otherwise play.
The money changes things.
The ace-3 hand really drives home adapting to the specific player, not just the general theory.
Huge point. Read the player, not just the book.
And the tools discussion is about weighing costs versus benefit for your own situation.
Exactly. Be practical.
There was one last point in their summary, too, about big stacks.
Oh yeah, big stack behavior. Not always loose. Depends on context. That's important. Don't just assume someone with lots of chips will play recklessly. You still need to pay attention to how they're actually playing in that specific game. Context again.
So we've done this deep dive into, what seems like a pretty specific world poker tournament. But like we said at the start, the idea wasn't just about poker strategy, was it?
Not at all. The real takeaway, I think, is how these scenarios give us a great model for thinking strategically in, well, pretty much any competitive or complex situation.
How so?
Well, think about risk assessment, weighing potential gains against potential losses. That's vital in business, investing, even personal choices. Understanding the game state, like your market position, your available resources for a project that's crucial everywhere.
Right. Knowing where you stand.
And maybe the biggest one, learning to read and adapt to other people's tendencies, your competitors, your colleagues, whoever. Understanding how they operate is so important for navigating tricky situations and, getting what you want.
It really is amazing how these poker examples map onto so many other things. Decision-making under pressure with incomplete information. That's life, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's about building that critical thinking ability, considering all the factors, and being flexible when things don't go exactly as planned or when people act, well, like unpredictable humans.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Think about a time, maybe recently, where you faced a high-pressure decision, didn't have all the facts, at work, personally, whatever.
Yeah.
How could thinking about risk, the overall situation, and maybe the tendencies of the others involved, how might that have changed your approach? Or maybe confirmed it? It's definitely something to chew on.
It really is. We hope you take these ideas, risk, context, adaptation, reading people, and think about how they apply in your own world. Making good calls under pressure, that's a skill worth developing no matter what you do.
Hello,
Good afternoon, Norman. Different setup today.
Ontario right now.
In Canada? You didn't say anything, but you have a new setup.
Yeah, just visiting some friends. Just been traveling around the countryside and so on.
Oh, great.
Any news?
Yeah, I have news. So the thing is, I'm expecting 3 deliveries today. My book and 2 other deliveries. The 2 other deliveries, I have to pick them up in town. And it's actually good if I do it after our lesson, because if not, I have to do it tomorrow. And the other one is my book, which I hope that I will receive. Because the delivery should happen today, but they don't have any pickup location. So they will deliver my home address. And there's a good risk. There's a risk that somebody will steal it. So I also have to keep checking on that because it says that it is out for delivery, but it doesn't say when I will get it. It's annoying because Amazon in the region where they have chosen a new delivery service. It is called Planter, and it's something that nobody knows about. It's not DHL or any big thing. So it's a painful experience because I will be delivered at home, and that's the only place where they can deliver. And since I have mass immigration here, well, there's a good chance that it will disappear. I have to be also checking on that. So today is not the best moment for me to look at the markets with you because of those issues. But we can find another moment this week, or we can do it next week if you want.
All right. Yeah, I don't know when. Maybe we could meet up this week. Do you want to set up a time for it now?
Yeah, we could. Tell me when it would be fine for you.
How about tomorrow same time?
Well, tomorrow same time is easy to remember. Let's still write it down. Okay, I have it.
All right. So exciting day. 3 new deliveries coming in, right?
Yeah. And one of them is my exoskeleton.
Oh, you did order it.
Yeah, I did.
So we have lots to talk about next week when you've tried out your exoskeleton and all that.
Yeah. Since we are a little short on time, should we start by looking at some hands? I don't have a lot of marked hands because of the issue I told you with hand to note. And go ahead.
No problem. I did find that it's, I think, 10 euros a month hand to note if you don't play. Like there's a discounted price for certain tournaments and maybe, well, it could be an option. Anyhow.
Yeah. Look, I'll try to find a solution, but I cannot promise that my solution will work next week. So we'll see. If it doesn't work next week, then we play some games together. On the long run, I will find a solution, but I want to find something cheaper than 588 USD.
Like I said, that's not the price, right? It's around.
But that's the price they ask for me when I look and I say, go, well, you will see it. I will open hands
I
to
know,
it.
I've seen it. I'll send you the other link afterwards. I know what you're referring to, but you could get a better price with them. Much better, like 80% cheaper.
Okay.
But yes, otherwise, even, there's other options, right? Like Poker Tracker, for example, which is a one-time payment. So I think we can discuss it then. I can introduce you the options maybe next time. How does that sound?
Sounds good. I'm just waiting for the app to open.
All right. What about the idea I had that every lesson we start with 15 minutes of that practice, that game we played last time?
Yeah, that's great. But I'm still opening the app just to have it ready when I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marked hands.
All right. I guess let's start with these hands.
And hands to note opens faster now because it's the new app.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, a lot of my clients have been stressed out about the markets. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, I really would like to discuss that in detail with you. Not just talk, not just give 1 or 2 words. But no, I'm not stressed out.
That's nice to hear for a change. All right.
So ace, jack off. I'm in the small blind. Did they fix the big blind, small blind thing? We don't know. And now player 8 goes for 2.4 and player 3 goes all in. The button goes all in. So what do I do? Do I call? Do I fold? I only have 6.62 left. I did call. What do you think about that?
Well, what do you mean you have only 6.62? Into what? 6.62 bitcoins would be a lot, for example, right?
Well, you want to say me that I'm second, so I don't have to take a risk.
Yes, you're second. That's quite a favorable position to be in, considering that in your game, top 3 get prizes. Right. So, yes, I would have folded here for exactly that reason.
Okay.
And 2 people are already all in, right? So this time it did go your way, but there's a good chance one of them has a pair or could have ace queen, or it's not like it's always going to be like this, but I don't see it as a great scenario with 2 player all in. It seems okay with ace jack, but it doesn't seem great. And when it's not great, then it's just, it's a risk I wouldn't have taken here, which you didn't either, it looks like. So good.
Yeah, I'm mistaken. Actually, now I thought I did, but I did not. So I did fold. I did do the right thing. That's great. Now I have pocket 7s. 1 player goes all in and we are they still didn't fix the under the gun thing. Unbelievable.
All right, but there actually is 2 players all in this hand.
Yeah, because the big blind has also to go all in.
Yeah, good news is if we lose the big blind, we'll lose only how many chips?
Only 1 chip. Only 0.06. 0.06.
So that's good news for us, but it is another opponent in this all-in. Now, in this case, we have more than 6.63 big blinds, but what's different with this scenario compared to the last one?
Well, I'm far away from the bubble.
Exactly. We're right now in which placing?
Second to last.
All right, which would be what position then?
I think I'm 5th.
You are 5th at this moment, right? So certainly more reason now to take some risk. And the question is pocket 7s a favorite here against player going all in for 7 big blinds, roughly speaking?
Is pocket 7s a favorite? Maybe, yeah. No, I mean, he's going all in. He should be going in with quite a wide range if he plays correctly. So pocket 7s could be good enough, yeah?
Yes, and I do agree with you that we're slightly favorite here. And it's not great to be a slight favorite. However, in this scenario, we need to have something happen, right, for us to do well in this tournament. So, and as a slight favorite here, I think it's reasonable to call this all in.
Okay, I did. Went in my favor.
That's nice. So 2 out of 2 so far with the correct decisions. That's good.
Yeah, it's awesome. Next, pocket 5s. So I folded and it was the middle position which is cut off low jack. The low jack went all in. I was on the small blind, but I didn't have lots of big blind left. I was last, and I'm not directly on the bubble because there's 4 or 5 players left. So I thought I have to take the risk. What do you think? No, actually I folded. So yeah, I still folded even I was last. But I could have, maybe I should have taken the risk.
What place are you in this tournament currently?
I'm last.
Yeah, what number would that?
5th.
Right. What was your number for the last tournament?
Maybe the same.
It was the same, right? So that's similar. If you look at the all-in that happened, was it for same amount of chips or a bit more or a bit less?
I would say around the same, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Last time the player actually went all in for roughly 7 big blinds. So this time it's about twice as many. Well, 2 big blinds more than last time, right? So if they're going all in for a little bit more, are they taking on a little bit more of a risk?
Yes, I would agree.
Right. And if you think of it in the last hand,
But
both, yeah,
it's a range, and everybody under 40 big blind should act the same until 6 big blinds for me. But I still agree. If you go in for a little more, you take a little more risk in general. And not everybody plays ranges.
right. Another detail, that last hand, both of you were far from the bubble, right? So the other player also needed chips. That's why he was more likely to take on a big risk with an all. In this case, however, what place is the player who is going all in?
He's first to act.
Right? But
So it's the low jack again.
yeah, but what place is his chip stack?
Oh, he is third.
He's third, right? So that means he should be more cautious to not take on unnecessary risks here, right? Because the big blind has a lot of chips here. And if big blind decides to call his all in, then he could make a big blunder and go out 5th, which would be pretty disastrous for him. So in this case, what do you think of player 4's decision to go all in with ace-3?
I have to check my range.
Yeah, but what would you guess here? How does it seem for you?
Well, it doesn't seem so strong, but let me just check. So the thing is, he's the hijack.
Correct.
Yeah, it is out of his range. He shouldn't have. Wait, let me see. He has only 8 left, so let me see. Yeah, it's still out. Well, no, it is 2, 3. Okay, it is out of his range, yeah. He should only have done that with ace-4 offsuit.
And even that would be a mistake, considering that he's third in chips, right? Remember, if you're in a bubble fight and you have a good making top 3, then you should take on even less risks. So here actually he should have gone with a hand as good as or better. So he's quite outside of the correct play here. It's not very often we see people going all in with hands they shouldn't, right? More often that we've looked at, people tend to be too tight when they go all in. But in this case, this player is too loose. If we had known that, yes, we would call 5s, right? But the big detail we didn't mention yet is, well, 5s is a little bit weaker than 7s as well, right? So that's also to our disadvantage. So actually, I do agree with your fold here, even though in theory, 5s would be the smallest pair that would be recommended to call. But because in general, people are cautious going all in your games, then I think you made a good fold here. However, player 4 certainly did a bad all in. And what would that imply in the future hands? You would play, let's say a similar scenario happens where you see someone going all in with ace-3 that they shouldn't go all in with. What would that change, if anything, for the future hands you would play? What would you expect more from them?
Well, I would expect them to be too loose.
Right, and that could play out in 2 ways. Either if they go all in, maybe they're a bit looser than they should, but also the other way that when you go all in, they could as well be a little looser than they should be, right? So that would mean that you could call their all-ins less or more often, if you would, yeah.
I could call them more often.
Right, but for you to go all in, could you go more or less often?
I should go all in less often.
But why is that the case, even though they're calling you with the weaker hand on average?
because I want them to fold, and he won't fold. He will do an all-in, even if I want only to get a fold out of him.
Very good answers, Octavia. So that's exactly right. And finally, actually, the player in the big blind, player 2, also made a mistake, even though he has a lot of chips. King Jack suited against an all-in, very rarely a favorite, right? So that was a bit unnecessary from the big blind to call that all. A lot of all-ins happen by ace something or a pocket pair, and in either of those cases, King Jack isn't doing so well, right? When's King Jack doing well? If the other player has King 10, King 9, or Jack 10 or Jack 9, and these hands are all in way less often than hands like an ace or a pocket pair.
Yeah, I agree.
But in general, based on your experience, would you say people tend to gamble more, less, or normally when they have a big stack? What have you noticed?
Well, it depends on the guy, but there are some people who get scared that they lose the stack, so they get very prudent. But in general, they can afford to play more hands. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, bad players keep playing a lot when they have a big stack. So and they do a lot of mistakes, just as player 2 right now, calling with Jack King suited. So do they in general play more or less? What was the question? Do they play more?
I guess I should specify the question, because I think it's quite obvious that they can themselves take a few more risks in that they're not risking going out of the tournament, right? So they can go all in, they can put pressure on other players. But once player 4 is already all, now player 2 cannot leverage his big stack for pressure. All he can do is just to decide whether it's a good pot for him to get involved in or not. But in my experience, people tend to be a little more, well, you can be a little bit more loose, right? If you're not risking all your chips when calling an all-in, but you should still ask yourself, why even gamble for those chips, right? So in this case, he's in a very comfortable situation. If he loses that hand, he will be fine, but he will be much closer bunched together with the other players. And so it's not a big mistake, he called it, but it was still a bit of an unnecessary gamble. So I would keep my eye open also for that when there's someone with a very big stack, and especially if they're the big blind. And if you go all in into their big blind, then they can be more happy to gamble in that scenario.
Yeah, they can be, but when I play, I don't know if the player will do that or not.
That's true. But it's less likely that they're going to be tighter than usual. At least that's my experience. If yours is different, obviously, if you think the outcome is neutral in that regard, then you shouldn't do anything differently. And it does depend on the type of player you're up against as well. That's true. But in general, if I were to go all in, I'd rather have player 7 or player 8 in that big blind position than player 2.
But I mean, is the risk not the same if player 2 is on the cutoff? Because I think he would act the same, I don't think he makes a difference.
Actually, you should call tighter if you have more players to act afterwards. Because if player 7 calls this all in, he also has to worry about what if player 8, you or player 2, wakes up with aces.
Yeah, that I know. But for him, I mean, let's say his position on the board is fixed. Player 4, he's always in the middle position, which is Jack. So his position is fixed, but the other vary. I'm not always on the small blind. Player 2 is not always on the big blind. It's still the same thing for him. I mean, there's small difference. If player 2 is on the cutoff, it makes a small...
That would be better for him, yes.
Why? I don't see why it makes such a big difference.
Player 2, yeah. Well, it's not...
But there's a range difference. He would only call with... No, there's no range. He should adapt his range to the hijack. So it makes no difference. He should play the same hands if he's on the cutoff than if he's on the big blind. The only difference is the one big blind on the table he already has. But I don't think he makes a big deal out of it.
Well, the difference also is that it does make a little bit of a difference, that one big blind on the table for pot. But other than that, if player 2 sat there with player 7, if we switch those two positions, then player 2 has to be more cautious calling an all-in, because it could be a 3-way all-in. It could be a 4-way all-in.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I
Good.
don't think he would have called this king jack suited in cutoff. I could be wrong, but I would be worried there in cutoff. What if someone who's left would have ace queen or ace king or something, and then your king jack is in very big trouble?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And now, so you agree with my fault also, don't you?
I mean, knowing that he's going all in as loose with, if I knew he went with ace 3, then I think we both agree we would call. But you made this decision based on how people usually play and what's the right thing to do. And I do think 5s is a correct fold here, considering that people usually are tighter with all-ins based on that assumption.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ace, queen, offsuit, and I'm on the button.
Yeah, I'll start with a similar question. What placing are we in at the moment?
We are third.
Right. And if you notice, all the first 4 stacks are very similar, right? Top 4 is bunched together. And then the 5th and the 6th player have way less chips.
Yeah.
So what should it mean for 5th and 6th players strategy, knowing that they're a step away from top 4 at this moment? So player 5 and player 8 on the table, the players who are 5th and 6th play.
Yeah, I don't know what the question is, but those two players have to act. They have a lot of pressure because their chance of getting third is quite slim. So I think they will go all in with a lot of stuff and should be very active.
Yes, and not only, I mean, whether they will or won't is a separate thing, but they should at least be quite active because they're quite unlikely to get to top 3 at this point. All right, so that's the setup of the table. All the other stacks are quite equally matched here. So let's see how the hand plays out. Yeah, certainly we shouldn't go all in here, right? That's an unnecessary risk with as many big blinds as we have.
I do not agree with that.
Okay, what's your reasoning for it?
Ace queen is very good, and I think the only way they call is if they have a pair. If not, they should fold. So I think I can take the risk.
Now, what would you be taking the risk on for? What would be the positive outcome for it?
They fold, and I make something like 2.5, 2.4 big blinds.
And what's my issue with that?
It's not a lot, so it doesn't change a lot, my position.
I would exactly say this, that it's not even necessary, right? I mean, obviously, if you could have 2.4 big blinds more, that would be great, but it doesn't really have a big impact for your tournament. And for that reason, to take on the risk, what you mentioned, that you get in a scenario where someone calls you with a pocket pair, and then how much of a chance do you have against a pocket pair?
Best case, maybe 45%, probably less than that.
Exactly, very good. As you have an offsuit hand, then it could be even a little less than 45, but around that region. And consider how active people are in these tournaments, how many big blinds you have here. You're really, you know, if you just decided to fold every hand from this moment onwards, I think you would 80% get to top 3. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not going to propose that, but I'm just bringing that as an example of why I really don't want to go an unnecessary all-in route with this hand.
Yeah.
And you see, you got actually the same outcome, both players folding by risking the minimum, right? So the thing is, if you go all in and they have a crappy hand, they'll fold. But really crappy hands will also fold if you risk the minimum. Now, some middling hands might call this 2 chips. But if they call queen jack, queen 10, queen 9, all those hands, you will be in a favorable position with your ace queen and also taking on minimal risk while doing that. So actually, it's interesting that in your discussion you were
Yeah, no,
advocating for
I'm
all in.
I'm not very concentrated today because I have on my mind the 3 deliveries, and yeah, I'm not 100% in the game. Yeah, normally I wouldn't do an all-in with 21.8 big blinds here. So what I would do is only 2 big blinds. Do you still think that's a big mistake, or do you think that's
And what's the mistake?
putting 2 big blinds on the table and either hoping for a fold or wanting to see a flop with ace queen offsuit? Do you still think that's a mistake?
No, I think that's a very good play.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think that's the best play here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Norman.
You're welcome.
Now I have pocket kings, and he
Yeah,
already shows me the outcome, which is not nice.
Right, but there's very little to discuss here, right? You have the second best hand here. Now, what's unusual already about this hand?
2 players went all in.
They did not.
Well, player 3 didn't go all in, and player 6 also didn't go all in. So, but player 2 did put a lot, 4.62, so he showed a lot of strength. And player 6 said, well, I don't mind. And he did double that. He made an 2x, 3-bet. To me, why did I say they go all in? Because I don't think player 3 will fold 8.24 big blinds. And since he won't fold, I don't think that player 6, after putting 8.24 on the table, will fold. Even if player 3 goes all in, I don't think he will fold. So I thought there was a good chance they all go all in. And then I have to face them with pocket kings, but it's the second best hand. So I did.
Is there enough danger on the table at this point to be certain, or at least think it's more than half the time, that one of the opponents has aces exactly?
That I still don't know.
Well,
because I have no all-in right now. I have just a 3-bet, and it's not certain that the 3-bet was made with pocket aces. The 3-bet could have been made with pocket jacks, which I hope that player 6 only has pocket jacks.
Yeah, or pocket queens, right? Or a hand like ace king or ace queen.
Or ace jack suited. I even hope for that. But I did not know at this time that player 3 had actually pocket aces. That I couldn't know.
Yes, I know that. My question was more in regards to, is the scenario on the table looking so scary that we should just outright fold our kings or not?
I wasn't certain that they have pocket aces, and the only reason why I would want to fold the pocket kings is if I think that the guy has pocket aces. And here, if player 3 would have gone all in, and player 6 would have called his all in, then it would be hard to call with pocket kings. Then I would say, yeah, there's a good chance one of them has pocket aces. Let's fold. But right now, with what they did, I wasn't sure that that one of them had pocket aces. And even if I would have to put one of those 2 players on pocket aces, it would have been the small blind, not the hijack. I would have thought that the small blind had pocket aces, not the hijack.
Yes. But even in the scenario you described that both of them are all in, I would have still folded my pocket kings.
You still would have called your pocket kings even if they go all in, both of them?
Yes.
Why that?
Well, based on my
normally you are prudent, Norman. And now you tell me when they both pretend to having pocket aces, you do not fold. How come? Do you think they are bluffing?
No, I don't think that, but I do think they have other hands which you could say they're valuing or thinking that are good enough to go all in. So queens and jacks almost always, but then all those other hands like tens, nines, 8, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, they're not always taking this action, but people do take these actions with these hands, right? So I wouldn't be surprised at all if one of them has nines, the other one has tens. One of them has ace king, another one has ace. So for that reason, I see there being too many other scenarios other than the one that one must have aces. So in general, if there's only one hand that beat, you must have a very strong read or reason to fold at that point. Usually you'd need a couple more hands that's stronger than yours, right? So kings is extremely powerful here. And for that reason, really, I think this scenario, you have two options, either to go all in or to fold. And I would not fold here ever, I think. Now, why did I rule out the option to call this?
Because there's a very high chance one of them has an ace. And if the flop comes with an ace, well, then you're not in a good position with your pocket kings. And they keep betting, then you're not in a good position with your pocket kings.
Then you can quite comfortably fold. But why wouldn't I want to leave a way out for us? Wouldn't it be good? We just call, we see a flop. If there's an ace on it, then we get away from it. And if there's no ace on it, then we go all in on the flop.
Yeah, but does that happen often? Both of them showed enough strength that I guess at least one will show some aggression on the flop. I would be very surprised if a flop comes and then certainly they do nothing. They just check.
Right. But my point is, if there's no ace on it, then we will be more comfortable going all in on the flop.
Yeah, but I think that it is better if we go all in and we get one fold and then we face only one opponent instead of facing two. I think that is better.
Yeah, I do agree with that. But like you said yourself, it doesn't look like either of them wants to fold based on the actions they've taken.
So why would you do an all in? I think you do an all in because you're very confident in your hand, pocket kings, since it's the second best hand. That's why I think you do an all in. But I don't know if that really answered the question you asked. I don't really remember the question.
Yeah, the question was, why did I rule out calling here? And I only left options for all in or folding.
To me, it seems natural to go all in and not call or fold. Yeah, fold, you can think about it, but you said you would never call, you would never fold with pocket kings.
Right, but I would at least consider folding for, even though I said never, I would still ask myself if they're a super tight player, always have aces. But here's the thing I'm thinking about with this, is that if they do actually have aces, well, the flop doesn't have an ace, we'll still go all in and lose the hand, right? If we call here, they have aces, well, now there's only two aces left in the deck. So probably there won't be an ace on the flop. And then the flop comes some other cards, we go all in, they show aces. It doesn't really benefit us against aces, right? If we think they have aces, we should fold. We should not call. However, all the other hands could find a way out of the pot if we see the flop, right? So if someone has ace queen or ace king, they're likely gonna go all in now based on the action they've taken, but they could fold on the flop if there's no ace or a queen or a favorable card for them there. They could have something like pocket tens, maybe flop has a queen, and now they get scared with their tens. So the point why I wouldn't want to call here is you will still lose more often than not the maximum if someone has aces, but you won't win the maximum when they have ace king, when they have tens, when they have nines, when they have a stupid bluff or all these hands, because they are now more likely to fold on the flop compared to something like aces. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, you don't want them to fold on the flop. In your mind, they do not have aces. In your mind, the chance is higher that they have queens, jacks, tens, nines.
Ace king, ace queen, yeah.
Yeah. That's in your mind. There's more chance of that. So you don't want to leave them way out. And
exactly.
And if you go all in right now, there's also a small chance. It's not high, but there's a small chance. Player 3 with his, instead of aces with his 10 says, okay, now it looks like I'm facing two players go all in and I only have pocket 10, so let's fold. He gets reasonable, he gets prudent and he folds his pocket 10s. That would
also be good, yes.
Yeah, that would also be good because then our chance of winning are better because we only face one.
Less risk then, yes, exactly.
Okay.
But I think to summarize my point is, if we're very confident someone has aces, then best play is fold. But if we're confident that usually they don't have aces, then the best play is to go all in right now. Because the reason to go all in is that we think we have the best hand, right? And I agree with you. Most often we do have the best hand with kings. And actually you even go a tricky way. You don't go all in, but you try to make it more enticing for them, it looks like. But effectively you're on the all in.
Yeah, effectively I'm on all in. But I only did make a 2x.
Yeah.
No, I did half. What did I do? Half pot?
Well, half of the chips you had, right? So yes, you almost doubled his bet, yes.
And
so
I did get one fold. But of course, pocket. No, I did not. He had also all in. No, I didn't get one fold. Okay. So I did no mistakes on all of those 5 hands, I think.
Yeah, I'm wondering what you're highlighting hands that are your highlight moments, your good hands. And
no, those hands were quite difficult for me, and I was wondering about them. That's why I highlighted them.
You know what's good news? If in your difficult scenarios you do well, right? That's a very good sign.
Yeah, let's see if I can manage one day to be confident enough thanks to my results to go to level 2. And until then, I have to keep working hard. In poker, in poker you call it grinding, but I don't actually grind because I don't play enough.
Right. But I would, how would I say it? I would wish that it happens quickly, but I would also wish you with poker, it's very, very important to play as close to your best level as possible. And actually, based on my experience, I've often noticed this thing, that when someone starts winning a little bit and they get close to their goal, like you would get close to level, then for a lot of people, they start change something or lose their game there. So I would also wish you that put in effort all the way through, right? And not even if your results will get better, that doesn't mean you should start playing with less intensity, focus, and that you should try less hard, right? And actually that goes together with the point I made previously of when people have a big stack on the table, that's what often happens with them, that now they're less critical about the decisions they take on. They're often more loose and more gamble happy. So that's what I would wish for you, that you're able to stick to the intensity and your best play, whether you have 3 big blinds, you really try hard to make the best decision in game, whether you have 30 or 40 big blinds and you're first in chips, really carefully and cautiously examine the decision, but also however your results go, right? Sometimes you lose 5 tournaments in a row. Ideally, your 6th tournament, you would play the same way, whether you would win the last 5 tournaments or lose the last 5 tournaments. And I've noticed for people, it's very difficult for them to stick to that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I find that interesting. So that we change our behavior due to our results. And yes, it makes me think about the big mistake people make when they start trading. So firstly, they shouldn't trade, or because they don't have any knowledge about the markets. And it's a very stupid thing to start taking a leverage position, which is the most dangerous thing you can do if you don't know anything about the markets. That's very, very stupid. And so they take a lot of risk. But it can go 2 ways. I would say they have 80% or 90% chance of losing that position. Okay? And getting liquidated. So the biggest loss, which you should never be in a position where you can get liquidated. That should never happen. And
same in poker, right? So yes.
Yeah. So, but it can go 2 ways. Normally they lose everything and then they realize that it was really bad, that they should never have done it. And then they stop normally. If they're not in really gamblers, then they stop because they realize that it's no fun and they just lost an immense amount of money and they stop. I knew somebody, he said, my brother just took a short position for 30K. It was all his savings and he lost it in 4 days or 2 weeks. No, there's no reason you take your entire savings and suddenly take a short position in the markets. Even when you're in a bear market, you shouldn't do something like this, but he did. And he lost everything in 4 days or 2 weeks, So, but the other thing is you get lucky. And that's even worse because you get lucky and you make out of 30Ks, you make 90Ks. You tripled it. Then you say,
And
oh,
what will he do
then,
next?
then
He
you
will
say,
take another big risk. Yes.
then you say, oh, I'm genius. Look, I just made
Right.
90K. And the next, and and as you said, he then loses everything. So
And
both
might
can-
even take on a loan, right? Thinking that he's so good and great.
Yeah. Well, it's not really a loan taking a leverage position. It's just increasing your exposure to the market, to be more precise.
No.
You
I
also
mean,
you can also take a loan and then take a position in the market, but that could be quite prudent in some cases. So I'm not against you using that,
I meant
but
something different.
yeah. What
I
did
meant
you mean?
something different. I meant that they first make their 30K into 90K. Then they think they're so smart. Then they lose 90K. Then they think, well, I was unlucky, but I know I'm so great. And I already made from 30 to 90. So then they take on a loan for another 30, thinking they can get it back to 90.
Exactly. And you are perfectly right. So if it is hard, actually, if I teach, for example, 10 students and one of my students just gets lucky and because of that, he has good results, I would be scared for him. Because I would be scared he does stupid things, that he doesn't realize that he's just a lucky guy, that he's not really that much smarter than the 9 other guys who I teach to, but that his results were just better due to variance, you know? So I'm scared. Actually, I think the really good player is the one who has the toughest over the longest period of time. He will be the best trader in the future if he doesn't stop, if he doesn't give up, because that shows commitment, and he also learned some very valuable lessons. If he suffered a lot during an extended period of time, that would grave into his mind, you have to be prudent. It is really hard. I had it so hard. It was so hard over years. I cannot just take stupid risks now, you know? So actually, I think that's much better than if you get lucky and then suddenly you take too much risk, because most people already take too much risks. They do stuff they never should.
It's similar to why a lot of people who inherit their wealth tend to, is the word not flounder it, but yeah, I'm looking for a fancy word, but basically often something that they have gotten easily, they don't know the real value of it, and then they overspend or lose it in one way or another.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the entire answer to the question. I also think that, look, everybody goes see a doctor. Everybody, when his dogs are sick or don't feel well, sees a veterinarian. But you never ask yourself question about your financial situation and your financial position you have and how you manage your income. I try very hard to explain to my clients, and I even did it with your friend, that they should have a journal with their income and their outcome. You know, once you trade, you need a trading journal on top of that. But it is already a very healthy thing if you know what comes in and what comes out, you know, and what to pay. So you can prepare for it. And I'm like a broken disc, because I always tell them, download that app, install it, use it. It is very easy. You can start for free. And in the future, if you want to sync, all you can then it's just $1 or $2 to get the paid version. It is worth it. Do that. Know how your situation is, how much money you can spend, on what you can spend it, and so on. What you can invest. And all that you do not know if you don't keep track of your finance. So I try to tell them that. But I'm like a broken record. They never do.
All right. I already do it. I write down or keep all the checks, and I know exactly how much I spend on food, transport, electricity, everything.
That's great, Norman. I'm pleased to hear that. You're a very smart man.
Well, thank you. Another thing that stuck out to me was the way you said about people taking on enormous risk in the stock market. And I also think, a lot of people do that, right? They somehow think it's an easy way to win in a way. Isn't the stock market then the biggest casino or the gambling game in the world? Would you see it that way for a regular person? I mean, isn't there a lot of similarities to roulette or to poker or with slot machines, all of it, at least in the way people react with it, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, the ways, the example you brought, right? Someone takes all his savings. That would be in the poker terms. You take your whole bankroll, you sit down on one table or enter one tournament, and then you're hoping that you win the tournament, and then you triple or quadruple what you entered with, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah,
Do.
I understand. The thing is, casino is they use a lot of things to entice you to play. When you're in a casino, well, I never went into a casino, but I have one gambler in the family. He's sick. Huh? I mean, he totally destroyed his life with gambling. And when you go in at the casino, well, the dopamine rush is harder because you get instant reward. You either win or you lose when you have a rule. And then there are the girls who bring you always free drinks, free alcohol, and there's the fun around the table. Everybody talks and makes a couple of jokes. And if you put a lot of money on the table and are willing to lose a lot, everybody admires you. So there's a lot of stuff that makes it even worse. And there's advertisement, the red colors, and I don't know, but they get people very hooked. There's some examples. For example, a casino, and there are slot machines, and suddenly there was an inundation. Everything was full of water. The floor was covered in water because there was an inundation, or I don't know what, but there was water everywhere. And people still sit in front of the slot machine and keep playing them, even if there's water and even if it is really painful, but they're so hooked that they cannot stop, And in the market, it's very hard to get that kind of exposure. But a lot of people, even very wise people who have a very successful career, they enter the market and just lose an immense amount of money. So yes, what you say, is it the biggest casino in the world? Yeah. But
I don't mean it right? I mean,
as I told you, I have one guy in my family who is sick. He cannot stop but lose everything. The judges even ruled that he has no right to go into a casino again during his life. But he still finds way around that. So when you're really sick like that, well, I have never seen it in the market. Look, but the thing is, I think the markets hurt more because when you lose in the markets, you can lose much more money than you can lose in a casino. At least on the table, there's a limit, like 10K. You cannot put more than 10K on a roulette table, or I don't know what the limit is. I never went into a casino to play, so I have no idea. But at least there's a limit. In the market, there's no limits. You can do whatever you want with your money. So it's much more dangerous because even the best traders lose fortunes. I told you about Willy Woo, who was a very good analyst. And he was so famous because he introduced no indicators on the blockchain indicators, where most indicators are due to price or volume. The underlying principle is price or volume. But he introduced new indicators blockchain, and everybody thought, well, that's the new thing. With that, we'll make a fortune. And he opened a hedge fund. I already told you the situation. And people invested around 500 million. And he managed to lose everything in 6 months. No, in 6 months, he lost everything. His entire hedge fund went from 500 millions to zero. And then he said, well, I couldn't really, because of technical issues, I couldn't really go through with my strategy. Now that's BS. To me, that's BS. He just, even though he's a good analyst, he just took a risk he should have never taken. If you gave me 500 millions, yes, if I'm unlucky and I trade that, if I'm capable to do some trading on that, okay? If I'm unlucky, my 500 millions will go down to 250 millions or 300 millions if I'm unlucky. But there's a good chance with the 350 millions, I'll still make it up to 700, 900 and 1 billion. There's a good chance. But I should never take the risk that I totally lose the entire thing, It's like a bankroll. You normally should never lose it. Your capital also, you should never lose it. And unless it is really not your mistake because you went for FTX and FTX your broker goes bankrupt. And because of that, you lose everything. Well, then you
It is a
can
mistake.
then you can
Not,
argue
not,
then you can argue it
not,
was
not
yeah.
diversifying this
Exactly.
mistake.
But still, I wouldn't use just one broker. I would use several brokers to avoid that risk. So,
Yeah, I
so
have
even then,
two
it's a
comments.
mistake here.
I
But
have
it's
two
more,
comments.
you can more excuse it if it's the fault of BSF, Bank Fried, Bank Sam, I don't know how it's called. But the guy from SBF, Sam Bank Fried, I think his name was. Well, if you can put all the blame on him, then you look a little better, than if that's not even the case and you only have yourself to blame.
Right. So my two comments is, I don't actually remember you started with describing the kind of the friendly atmosphere of a casino. I don't actually like it at all. I find it fake and off-putting. To me, that's the one thing I don't like about the casino. I would prefer it way more if it had a more like a professional vibe to it, or more like a sports competition vibe to it, where yeah, we just came here to compete in poker and that's it. To me, a casino worker asking me, oh, would you like this? Or like giving like all this, to me, it actually works in a different way, that it makes me want to go less there.
Yeah,
So,
because you're very smart and you feel trapped, I think. Is that correct if I say that? Because
well,
people who lose a lot of money in casinos, then the owner of the casino goes down and says, hello, how are you doing? How is life? And would you like to stay in my casino for a couple of days? I have a great suite and it's all free for you. People who lose millions, that's how they get treated, They get a very favorable treatment just to make them stay a little longer, because they know that if the guy loses millions over a couple of nights, well, that's very good for the casino. And those guys get trapped. They get trapped into that, because everybody is so friendly and they say, yeah, we'll even offer you a suite that is very expensive and you don't have to pay for it. But maybe that's not what you're talking about.
Yes, I mean something like that, yes. But it's not only what you said is like a very specific example, right? But every like all the I don't have a good
you
way
like
of
it. You like it when it's professional, and everybody knows that we are high athletes and we are competing. But you don't like the friendly atmosphere. You told me.
Well, I don't like the fake friendly atmosphere, I guess, right? Like,
yeah, I saw Daniel Negreanu, for example, in one casino, and a girl who is also a streamer, who streams her hands and her casino life, so she has, so it makes her a second income. She went to Daniel Negreanu, said, hello, how are you doing and everything. And then she said, okay, I'll see you at the final day table, And so you don't like that kind of intervention because one, it's not certain that Daniel Negreanu makes it to the final table, and it's not certain also that she will make it to the final table. But you don't like that kind of atmosphere when people are lying and giving fake compliments, acting as if they are your friends when they are not.
Exactly. And then even if you take a slot machine, right, it's always like these big numbers of everything you can win, right? But it's very, I would like it more like realistic, I guess.
Yeah, I understand. You want people to be true and honest. And I think that's a very good thing to expect from life and people. I also don't like when people are critical. And a lot of times it makes me think of my friend Marian. Even with religion, they are so hypocritical, because not everything is fake in Catholicism. There's a lot of good stuff in Catholicism if you take it seriously and try to understand it. But nobody teaches that, people. Not even priests will teach you why it is good. If you ask him, why is that the case? He says, I don't know. God decided so. No, that's not the answer. There's a philosophical truth to it, and the religion, they took their wisdom from philosophers, from ancient wisdom that existed before that. So they had some access to Socrates and other wise men, and they just took some principle from them and put it into the religious books. So, but there's always a reason why something is good or something is bad. And you should be able to talk about it, understand it. And once you do that, then you have to try to make it a reality in your life, to live in accordance with those principles. I see that in nobody. And that's why I think it's all fake. And that's why I don't like it. Norman, do we call it a day for today? Because I have to pick up my stuff in town, and I see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we can talk about only the markets, or if you want, we can also take a little time to do the game you want us to play. Is that okay with you if we do that this time because of my deliveries?
Yeah, I did have good 2 replies to this discussion we had.
Sure.
More, but I can leave them for tomorrow.
No, I really would like to hear them now, so you don't forget, and I have time for that because I can pick it up until 7 o'clock this evening, so I have more than enough time for it.
All right. So one with the fakeness, I had a poker example for it. Most people who come into poker, what kind of tournaments do they play, right? You play that 8-player tournament. Most players will go, for new players to poker, will go into the tournament which has the most people in it. Why? They're not going into it for the reason there's the most people, because tournaments like that usually have the biggest prize for first place, right? So people will go, oh, I can enter $1 and first prize is maybe a few $1,000s or even 10,000. But they don't think about the fact that there's thousands and thousands of opponents there. And what actually happens in that environment is, even if that player is somehow very lucky and is able to get far in that tournament, he will find himself finally in the final table where the big pay jumps happen, right, in tournaments. But most people, how they practice poker is they only play very big tournaments. So that means you make final table maybe 1 or 2 times a year. So what happens as a result is they have no chance actually. Because even if they do get to final table, to pay jumps, they don't know how to play if there's 4 opponents left, 3 opponents left. But they're all gravitating towards it because the advertisement of the biggest first prize, that's what people want to do, right? Whereas in reality, the best tournament players are the tournament players who often have played a lot of sit and goes, which means that you've been on hundreds of final tables, right? So you actually have a chance when you get there. So what was my point with that? That most people, I guess I wanted to bring an example on that fakeness part, right? And that in some ways also people attach themselves to it. So maybe there's not much to do about it, because if you did do a casino, which is like a card room, like a competition where the environment is different, it just would be less successful, because a lot of people just want to go to that hopeful place, or the place where there's free drinks and all this stuff that goes together with that. That was first. And then second point was on stock market being a casino, even though it's not promoted and there's no short skirt ladies related to stock market. If you think about financial news, a lot of financial news is actually promotion of the stock market to people who know nothing about it, right? To people who are like, invest into these stocks. I think, wasn't it just a while ago with like the Nvidia, how you pronounce it, than Apple, and those made records? Or even if Bitcoin hits a new record, suddenly it's in the news of how great an opportunity it is and all of that. And in that way, it also works as like, the people who read those news, they don't know anything about the market or how it works or the cycles of it or any of that stuff. And then they're like, well, the financial advisors or the financial reporters, news guys said that it's a great time or a great way to use your assets. And they put a lot of, so in that way, there is a promotional aspect to the stock market, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the worst thing is that when they say it's a great opportunity and look what happened and how smart people are and you shouldn't miss out and so on, that's the worst moment where you can put money in the stock market. So they do people very a disfavor, by that. But look, I had an interesting discussion with your friend, and I learned a lot by talking to somebody like your friend. And, it's very hard for me to say, but I think that the market, I cannot, there are people who just say it's bad because so many people lose. And they have a very solid argument. Because if effectively 98% of people lose money, then it's, for the masses, it's a very bad idea to go into the stock market, and they never should, But I offered my services to your friend, and I did it until now for free. And did I reach the goal I wanted? I'm not sure at all. Okay. So he was very eager to become actually a trader. And I explained to him that that's the most hard thing. And I explained to him all the effort he will have to put into it. And that didn't turn him off. Even I made it extreme. I said, yeah, but what would you do if you get 50 losing position one after the next? What will happen? And I explained the work he had to put in, the hours and the time, and that when an alarm goes off, you have to look at the market, all that. But nothing did turn him off until he started asking questions about how much it would cost. So I gave him a number. I said, yeah, well, you have to expect to lose in the first years around 500 USD a year, Even if you start small, I mean, that's reasonable. That you can lose 500 a year until you make it. And I don't know how many years it will take you until, instead of you losing 500, you start making 500 a year. But that could be a very long process. And when he realized that it will be expensive at the beginning or for a long period of time,
Not expensive though.
He was turned off. But that did turn him off. I don't think it's expensive, as you say. I don't think it is. But that did turn him off.
Maybe he thought it would take less time than a year or a few years. Maybe that bit.
Yeah, you have to ask him to know the exact answer. Maybe he doesn't even know the exact answer. But I also gave him a strategy that everybody can follow, and you only need fortitude. You need to understand the strategy. I tried to explain it to him, and he's very smart in understanding why that strategy on the long run will work. But still, I'm not sure that he will actually put it into practice, but that's a strategy everybody can use, and it will be profitable if you use it over a long enough period and you can follow it, and everybody could. Normally people can do that, but even that I'm not sure he will do, So, and the last thing is with your friend he's smart, but smart is also dangerous because it gives you a big ego, He sits next to me and he thinks it's easy to become profitable. Because he says, well, I'm at least as smart as Titus, and because of that, I can make it since he made it. But it's not just to be smart, it's to never give up and keep and have a lot of mental fortitude, a will of perceiving and having some fascination for the markets. I didn't even close my charts. Normally I close them because I only want to concentrate on you, but I still have 2 open charts right now under my eyes, And you must be willing to have that kind of dedication. If you do not, if you find there's a kind of beauty in the markets, I like watching them. I like seeing what's happening. And I'm right now, that might change again in the future if I go to a higher level. But right now, even if I lose money, I still find it interesting, and I'm not turned off because of it, I don't get desperate. But the strange thing with your friend is we spent 2 afternoons together. Okay. It's a small critic of him. I said a lot of good things about him, and a lot of compliments, but I also have to give the other side. Okay. The thing that I found strange about your friend, and that I cannot explain really, is that we spent 2 afternoons together. I paid for every drink. I even paid for a meal. And I was kind. I answered to the best of my abilities all his questions, and tried to make it as simple and as clear as possible. And what really shocked me? Not once did I receive a thank you. Well, when I talk with you, I always receive thank yous. My kids always say thanks. I would teach them always to say thanks when somebody does something for them. But I spent 2 afternoons, paid for everything, food, everything, answered all his questions. And not once did I hear coming from his lips a thank you, as if if saying thank you would kill him. That was strange to me. Now the first time that it happened, I said it's a coincidence. He maybe forgot. But then I spent 1 more afternoon with him. He arrived at 1 and he left at 7:30. I spent all the time with him, paid for everything, and answered all his questions. And I did not receive 1 single thank you. That was strange to me. So please don't make a story about it, because I'm not obsessed about it. But I just don't understand, because it's not a cultural thing, since you always say thank you a lot. And it makes everything, you should always show most gratitude possible when somebody does something for you. You always should. It's a Stoic principle. And it was very strange. When I talked about the school I was in and they allowed me to stay, they gave me a stipendium. You said it is called, what was the word you used last time? Yeah. I was a kid and I was in a very difficult situation and I don't think I showed enough gratitude. And I'm regretting it every day of my life because I have a conscience, and I really hope that one day I can go there and express my gratitude for what they did to me and offer them something like my services or my time or anything. But I really, really feel bad about not showing enough of gratitude. But there's an excuse. I was in a very difficult situation. My parents abandoned me. I was living through heavy bullying every day. And afterwards, I ended up on the streets, broke, without somewhere to sleep or money in my pockets, without a roof over my head. So there are excuses why I wasn't able to show all my gratitude, because you cannot go in a billionaire school and say, yeah, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm just starving on the street corner. That's not something you can tell a billionaire. He would look very strange at you if that's the answer you give him, So I was in a very, very, very difficult situation and that's one of the things. And I was a kid, and there was all the heavy bullying against me. So all those circumstances made it very hard to show gratitude. And at that time, I wasn't Stoic. So that's all I can say. But I regret it every day of my life that I didn't show enough gratitude,
Yeah, I didn't know all these details of like what you mentioned now. That makes it even more impressive, everything you've done and you're doing, right? That you've been able to still keep your humor and optimism. And it would be very easy for someone to be, what's this word, like in a movie, right? How villains are made, right? You start to hate the world. You think so badly about everyone. And you've kept all this enthusiasm and joy and love and all these things. So that's really wonderful. Regarding what you said, extremely embarrassing for me, right? But as you said, you also said many good things. So there's always some good and bad, I guess. But I'm speechless. No, I won't. But
don't make a story about it. Don't make a huge deal about it when you see him or something like this.
No, obviously.
Because I'm not mad. It's just something that was curious to me. That was strange.
It's just that I'm speechless about it. And so the only thing I will do is I will start to notice it more, right? In the future, I will keep an eye open for it and see if it is something. And then if it happens with me at some point, then I will ask him about it. But I would
I think that's good.
I would even, it's in a way rude to ask it. But
I only met him twice. And if I see him again once, I will bring that topic up. I will just make a joke about it or see how he reacts. But we'll see. It's nothing bad. It's nothing to worry about. It's just being polite,
The only thing that comes to my mind is, Estonians in general, don't take me as I think we're quite a reserved nation and a reserved group of people. And I think our people are less likely than most nations to show emotions, right? To express love, for example, or all these things. I feel like people don't hug here very often, for example, and they're just hold eye contact less often. They're just more, it's not one of the strengths of the people here to be very, it's not like they're not warm-hearted. It's just that they're very hesitant to show it out for whatever cultural reason. I have no idea why exactly, but so that's the only thing that comes to my mind. That's saying thank you in a way. That's like a personal thing. It's like a hug in a way, right? Or giving someone a compliment, or even saying, "Hey Titus, you have a nice tie on today and you're looking really good and sharp," and stuff like that, or you have beautiful glasses and nice headphones or whatever, right? I'm obviously, it's a bit stupid how I'm saying it all in a row like this now, right? But what I mean in general is people don't do it even amongst themselves that much, that they pay positive respects to people. I think it's one of the things with our people here culturally, that in a way a compliment in my country is it's like shown in actions here in a way. And if someone wants to meet you again, then, in Estonia, they like you. No one here would say, hey, you're a cool guy, I like you. But you would only know that by them wanting to interact with you. The same thing, if someone's thankful, I think Estonians are way more likely to do something thankful back. So, we'll see, right? I could be also wrong about this, but I think that could actually be something that's maybe not so much only about him. Maybe it's for him even more than usual, right? I'm not saying he's also like the average Estonian. It's tough to know what the average person is like, right? But I think for certain people here are less expressive about their emotions than somewhere like France or even Germany. I lived in Germany for a month, and people were way more likely there to smile and Germans aren't known to be necessarily super friendly people, but it's just our people are, I think the word is reserved as a general thing. And I don't know how much really Mikkel is actually very social and all those things really. But yeah, I don't know. I guess time will only tell that. But that's one thing, yes, that it's, and now I'm thinking what could cause it culturally, but I have really tough to find the answers for it, that people are, afraid really to show out their emotions as much as people from abroad.
Okay, Norman, what helped me a lot, you said I could have become a psychopath, hate the world or something like this if you look at my upbringing. And yeah, you're not wrong with that. But what saved me is when there's a lot of darkness, sometimes there's also light, And if you cling to that light, it gives you hope. And for example, you are one of those lights in my life. So I know that there's good in humanity because I see you every week and you're just such a generous and intelligent and pleasant person to be with, I'm very lucky to have found you. So that's one of the lights that gives me hope in humanity, because I don't see just the bad aspect of it, the hatred and everything that goes wrong, but I also see the other side, the love, the caring, the compassion, the help that people are willing to give you, and so on. So I also see that side. So there's also light. And what saved me is the ancient philosophers. So Stoicism, so discovering Stoicism, because they went through also a very hard life and very tough circumstances, and they still made it as big philosophers and as respectable people, and showed that all the things fortune can throw at you and all the pain you can go through, you can be stronger than that and rise above it. And I believe them because they all managed to do it. And I thought, well, if they could make it under those circumstances, then there's no reason why I couldn't, So philosophy saved me.
You know what surprises me? If I think of how Stoicism is usually portrayed in the mainstream, I haven't noticed it's portrayed as a very hopeful or positive. It's not that you said that, right? But it's interesting that you see it in that light.
Yeah. Well, everything.
Do you agree?
Everything
Do you agree
is
that it's portrayed more as something like, it's a bit gloomy, I would say, how it's usually portrayed, Stoicism. No? Maybe I'm wrong about this.
I just know that people think it's too hard what we teach and what we expect of humanity. And that's why they like more other schools where they think their time will be more pleasant. But look, everything, it's like a poker game. Everything you do is based on reason and logic. And I think that will save you. Just as on a poker table, if you play your best hand, it will save you. And in the art of understanding things about this earth, what they are worth, what you should strive to and what you should avoid, all those things will also save you. Philosophy will save you if you understand it and practice it. So, and it's all logical. It's all reason. You can always explain it. You can always understand why that's the position of the philosopher and why he teaches what he teaches. It might be hard for you if you're not used to it, because nobody talks like this or nobody thinks like this nowadays. But yeah, for me, it gives me a immense courage and an immense amount of hope. But that's because I'm already at a higher level. If you are starting, well, then it might be harder for you. And also, I have very good news on that topic. I'm working on my translation and it goes very well. I cannot promise that it's a 100% translation. I think that in the process of translating stuff, some things get lost, I don't think it's 100% translation. But it's the same for me when I read Seneca or any other ancient philosophic guy. It would be better if I read it in Greek or Latin. It would be better than the French translation. So stuff will be lost in translation. But I think that 90% of what I'm saying is in the text. Now, my vocabulary is very advanced because the underlying text is very well written. So I use words that are quite rare in the English language. Most people don't use them. So once you will read it, you will probably need a dictionary and look some stuff up. But apart from that, it should be great, and it should happen soon. So I hope that I can soon tell you that the translation is done and you can get a hand on it.
You think?
Soon, quite soon. I haven't finished, but I hope it happens quite soon. Okay.
I have
at least
two very quick comments here.
I said 2 months or 6 months. 6 months you can forget. I think I can make it in 2 months. So, and even maybe a little sooner. So I don't want to give any date because I don't know how much I will work every day on it. But I hope you can take a look very soon at my book.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. That's exciting. 2 very quick comments.
If you don't like what I say or what I teach, okay, please don't hate me. Okay, I really don't want to have friendship over it. Just stop reading the book if you really think it's really bad. But
I think it will,
let's keep our work together. And
I think, like you said, there's a lot of hopefulness, right, in Stoicism. So I think it will be great. Very quick comments. Maybe notice if Michael is in some other ways also expressive emotionally, or if he's overall very reserved in that way, right? Because
I tried my best, but I also told you before I met him, maybe he will be very disappointed in seeing me because of what I tell him, and maybe because what I said wasn't what he expected, or my way of talking, or my way of presenting myself, or my way of, I'm not indifferent. So most people are indifferent. They say, for example, everything doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are heterosexual, if you are homosexual, it doesn't matter if you are black, it doesn't matter if you're white, it doesn't matter if you work a lot, it doesn't matter if you don't work. They're all indifferent about everything. They don't care. They say, if you like ice cream, it's fine, and you want to eat that all day, it's fine. If you want to go to McDonald's and eat burgers till you die, if you are 800 kilos or you starve to death, everything is always fine to them, But I have a lot of principles and moral, so I am not indifferent. And even if I try to be moderate, maybe he perceived me as an extremist, And so
don't
maybe
worry, I know what you're like.
Maybe
I've had many discussions with you, right? So
maybe I don't know how I came over to him and what his impression is. Maybe that's why one of the reasons why maybe he dislikes me, and maybe he hates me because of what I've said. I don't think that's the case, but who knows, So anyways, you cannot be a friend with everybody on this earth, and I tried my best, and if that's not enough, well, I'm sorry for it. Right now, I cannot do any more than that. Maybe one day I'm smarter, but right now I did my best.
I think all is good. I think he's very grateful for you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wanted to meet you so many times. And I think it's difficult for him to express some emotions. I think that's the thing. But very lastly, I did hear you saying that you see me as one of the lights in your world, right? So
yeah,
and
in my life, yeah.
That made me very happy to hear that. And I also feel the same way about our meetings, that I'm happy with the progress I see you've done in poker, but in general, how you are, all the interesting topics you bring up, or the videos or things you recommend. I also very much appreciate it. And I can also say that I also see you as a light in my life, right? So I want to say thank you, right? Which goes together with the topic of today as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow to hear what you plan to talk to me about, right? So very excited about that.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for the lesson. I really enjoyed it. And it was, as always, a very interesting talk and a pleasant moment. I really enjoy a lot our meetings once a week. I always look forward to them. So thanks a lot for everything, Norman. And see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.